From B Media Production, this is B Podcasting. Engage your audience with podcasts.
Hi and welcome to episode 11. I'm Nick Schildberger. This episode we hear from the Head of Communication at GE, Australia and New Zealand, on the brilliant Australian-produced podcast Decoding Genius.
I think the world has changed so significantly that the way people want to interact with brands is completely different to 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or even 12 months ago. They really want to connect on a deeper level, and they want to hear stories that resonate with their values and their aspirations. And when you can do that as a brand, you build a stronger level of trust with your audience.
That's Joanne Woo a little later. But first, I'd like to welcome my co-host and podcast aficionado, Chris Ashmore.
Hi, Nick.
Now, Chris, you told me just today that Apple has ditched its iPod Nano and iPod Shuffle, which I did not know. Do you think we can now drop the name podcast for something better?
Look, I think we probably can, although it won't happen.
Well, it's because Apple invented it, so...
They did. Well, it's a generic word now for audio content that's downloaded and streamed, but it didn't really ever resonate so well with me and a lot of people. I mean, Amazon's not using, or Audible's not using the word podcast for their audio content for years. You know, we're probably a bit snobby here at B Media Production, but we've always used, say, audio programs, but we've started doing it from the days of audio cassette. Look, I'm getting more used to the word podcast. It's all right, but I wish there was a better word, yeah.
Well, at least the quality of podcasting is improving, so hopefully that will help.
It is. It's making the image of the podcast better, so that's great.
Now, to our feature interview today, you spoke with Joanne Woo of GE about its highly successful Australian podcast.
Yeah, I did. And this isn't the first time that GE's dabbled in podcasts. Listeners will be familiar with the 8-episode science fiction drama called The Message, which hit number 1 in iTunes in 2015 when it was released.
Which was produced in the US, right?
Well, that's right, yeah. And at the end of last year, though, GE in Australia produced a podcast series which soared in popularity in Australia and overseas. And look, it won a coveted International News Media Association award. It's called Decoding Genius, and it was a big production developed by GE alongside Macquarie Radio Network and Fairfax Media. And I asked Joanne Woo, VP Communications at GE Australia and New Zealand, why they've embraced podcasting to engage with audiences and how it ties in with GE's overall marketing strategy. First, she tells me what Decoding Genius is all about and what sets it apart from other podcasts.
Decoding Genius is a 6-part series where we investigated the stories of 6 young geniuses unearthed in Australia and around the world. And we looked at people like Jordan from Sydney, who built a mind-controlled wheelchair, as you do, and Maya, who invented a new smart antibiotic at age 10 and is now contributing to world-leading physics and medicine. So the core story arc for Decoding Genius was built around the well-known quote by Thomas Edison, who, by the way, is the founder of GE, where he said, "Genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration." So we told their stories with the podcast. What made them who they are? What challenges did they have to overcome? How did they deal with failure? And what's next? And the performance was astounding and it actually took me by surprise. Decoding Genius became one of the most successful branded podcasts in Australia. And in its first week after launch, it ranked in the top 10 podcast list on iTunes.
It's been incredible. Now, a podcast, though, it's not something that GE has done in Australia before. What was the idea behind doing a podcast versus something else?
Well, I think it comes down to the storytelling and wanting to find a platform where we could tell fascinating stories in an intimate way with people, with audiences. And we wanted to do that because we believe that great stories shape you and that they inspire, they drive change. And at GE, we see our role as an expansive brand to get people excited about science and technology and the impact it can make to changing the world. I mean, when you look throughout history, our world has progressed because of the ideas and the courage and the persistence of people who saw a better way. And it's through science and technology that has driven human progress. But we also wanted to show people that there are still remarkable breakthroughs happening today and ultimately the future is bright. So we wanted to tell that story, and we wanted to give it justice and not just tell it in 30 seconds or 1 minute in a video. So we thought to do that justice, we had to do it through a podcast.
Well, you tell the story well, but what's noticeable or what makes it stand out is there's very little mention of GE in the series, in the podcast. There are no ads plastered inside it. What's the rationale behind that?
Yeah, look, it's more important to us that the content is meaningful and grounded in what we know resonates with our audience. I think the world has changed so significantly that the way people want to interact with brands is completely different to 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or even 12 months ago. They really want to connect on a deeper level, and they want to hear stories that resonate with their values and their aspirations. And when you can do that as a brand, you build a stronger level of trust with your audience, because what you stand for is aligned with what they stand for. And in this case, for us, it's that science is cool and it's making the world a better place. And that to me is a more important message than having any ads or any sort of brand messages throughout the podcast.
Now, the reception to it has been incredible, and GE and Fairfax has won an International News Media Association award for Decoding Genius. Outside of the awards, what kind of response have you received from the general public and others?
Well, Decoding Genius remained in Australia's top 10 Apple podcast list throughout the 6-week campaign, and it remained as number 1 in the arts category as well throughout those 6 weeks. It integrated with multiple platforms and mediums as well, so we amplified it through various channels like Fairfax and Huffington Post, and it allowed us to own the innovation space and be at the head of the marketing curve, plus engage current GE customers and attract new ones. So the feedback that we've heard from customers and from our social media community has been really positive. We've had people really engage with the content and share it and also comment on it. And in the end, we've had 170,000 downloads and growing. And to me, it proved that brands can own innovative, evergreen content and be storytellers.
Well, a lot of organisations or companies that are following this kind of branded podcast may want to know if there was a kind of return on investment from podcasting. Is that something that you try to measure?
Look, I think there are some things that you can measure and some things that you just need to experiment with because you know it's a growing platform. So we do have metrics like engagement and brand awareness. But what's more important to me is, does the content resonate with our audience? Do the stories inspire them? And in doing so, does it create a more meaningful connection with what the GE brand stands for? So, what we've seen is that our podcast series was among the first in Australia to be selected by Spotify when they launched their podcast channel. And today, Virgin Australia still features Decoding Genius in their in-flight entertainment. So all this, I think, speaks to the quality of the content and the storytelling, and it's more important than the ROI necessarily.
The topic involved in the podcast, something that resonates throughout the world, really, and you did interview young geniuses in Canada and Australia. Is that kind of setting an audience that's not just focused on Australia but the rest of the world?
Yeah. For us, we wanted to create something in Australia that was globally scalable for GE markets around the world as well. So yes, you're right. Out of the 6 geniuses, I think we had 3 from Australia and 3 from other parts of the world, including Canada. And it really just came through our investigation processes of finding out, in Australia and around the world, who's doing really remarkable stuff that's really changing the world and who are young as well. I mean, these geniuses are in the ages of 10 to 25 and really just smashing so many big challenges that we as a society grapple with. So we thought that this kind of storytelling and these stories, it has no bounds. It's not just limited within Australia. I think these kind of stories are global. So we wanted to reach global audiences as a result.
Now, GE, encompasses so many different products, so many different industries. How does the podcast tie in with GE's overall marketing strategy?
GE is going through our biggest transformation in our company's 125-year history, and that is to become the world's digital industrial leader. So when you look at who we are today, it's completely different to who we are 10 years ago even. So our marketing strategy has to bring that vision to life, and that extends to how we show ourselves as a brand. We're always among the first to try new platforms. We push ourselves to reach new audiences in unexpected ways, and innovation is in our DNA, including the way we lead with our brand.
Well, it's encouraging also to see GE's recent initiative in Australia called Decoding Industry. Can you explain a bit about what that's about and how you've repurposed audio from conferences into podcasts?
Well, earlier this year we held a big event with a phenomenal list of speakers, including Alan Joyce from Qantas, Dom Price from Atlassian, Kathy Foley from CSIRO, and Alan Mackay-Sim, who is this year's Australian of the Year. And it was also hosted by Adam Spencer, who is quite remarkable in his own right, by the way. So we thought this content is way too good to just have it for an event. We wanted to extend the life of it and amplify it further. So really, it's the ultimate twofer. We were running the event. We thought, let's just record them, turn them into our second podcast series, which we called Decoding Industry. And so far, it's been downloaded nearly 40,000 times.
Well, looking towards the future, Joanne, should we expect GE doing more podcasting projects? What's the future hold?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think we have a choice anymore. I think audio is going to kill the video star, but that's probably me being overdramatic. Certainly, what we're seeing is that audio is experiencing significant growth as a platform and will one day be consumed just as frequently as video, if not more. So I think as a brand, you need to have an audio strategy, and it provides a channel for brands to engage with audiences on a deeper and more intimate level, as I mentioned before. So we will definitely have more podcasts in the future, and we'll also have some other cool brand activations that involves drones and Jimmy Fallon and Central Station in New York. Not necessarily in that order, but watch this space. It's going to be a lot of fun.
And if I can ask, what podcasts do you listen to, Joanne?
I am a podcast junkie. So the podcast that I listen to regularly is the Good Life Project. I find that it centres me a little bit and kind of gives me a different perspective outside of business and outside of the crazy, fast-paced world to just centre me on what's really important. I also listen to the Tim Ferriss show because I think he's a really great interviewer, and he interviews some really remarkable people who have really great life advice. And I also like to listen to Freakonomics and other sort of geeky kind of podcasts because that's kind of fuels the inner geek for me. So yeah, those are probably my favourites.
That's Joanne Woo.
Did I hear Joanne say audio is going to kill the video star?
Yes, you did.
Now, I know it was tongue-in-cheek, but her point about businesses needing an audio strategy is much more real. Do you think many businesses right now would actually have an audio strategy?
Look, not many smaller or even bigger businesses, no.
It's not surprising, though, that a business like GE, very innovative around their communications and content production, does. But I was actually quite interested in the way they produced their second podcast, Decoding Industry, because that's a great example of repurposing content. I mean, they spent an absolute fortune on putting that live event together with the speakers she mentioned, which would have been fantastic for the audience there. And then really didn't have to spend a lot more to turn it into a podcast, which didn't have the same production level as Decoding Genius. But they've had 40,000 downloads.
Well, that's right. It's something that's reminiscent of TEDx talks, yeah, where you've got the video of the conference and then the audio of the video of the conference. But it's not hard for businesses. They do it all the time, particularly bigger businesses or government organisations where they hold these conferences. And if you don't go to it, you don't get to listen to what can be very good talks. So they're doing it. That's great.
And without an audio strategy, you're going to miss those opportunities.
That's exactly.
But for a 140-year-old business, GE is certainly quite innovative.
Well, and that's the point. You don't have to be a startup or a small business to be innovative. you can be a large organisation like this is. And, Heather Dawson, our executive producer, was talking about this week. After hearing the podcasts, she had always imagined GE as this old, lethargic conglomerate that was big in its day, 50 years ago. But, it's a company that invented the incandescent light back in 1879, and then in 1938 it invented the fluorescent globe, and it did some other things. But today it's leading the world in wind turbine technology. It's dabbling in cancer research, and it's at the forefront of technology, ultrasound, a whole range of different inventions. So with these podcasts, it reflects that innovation, and it's being rewarded for it.
And through their podcast, GE are bringing a more personable or human element to their brand, which is just so important. Well, that's it for episode 11 of Be Podcasting. So that you don't miss out on future episodes, why not subscribe in Apple Podcasts or where you get your podcasts? And if you found this valuable, we'd love you to leave a review. For more about us, you can go to be.com.au or Twitter @BEMediaProd, or drop us a line at info@be.com.au. We'd love to answer any questions you have about the world of podcasting. We've been helping brands of all sizes create audio to communicate their message for more than 3 decades, and we'd love to discuss working with you. From all of us at Be Media Production, thanks so much for listening.
Be Podcasting is produced by the team at Be Media Production. Managing Director Nick Schildberger, Executive Producer Heather Dawson, Producer Chris Ashmore, and I'm Peter Letts, Director of Audio. For more about us, go to be.com.au.